In the burning heart of Arizona, 1885, there lived a man whose name stirred both fear and respect, Daniel Boone. He was the boss of outlaws, a law unto himself, a man who'd long forgotten what mercy felt like. But sometimes, even the hardest hearts meet someone who reminds them what it means to be human again. This is the story of a man who ruled the desert with a gun in his hand and found redemption in the hands of a woman and her child. Watch till the end to uncover how it all ends. Tell us where you're watching from, partner, and don't forget to join our SleepWest family. Now saddle up and let's ride into the story.
The Arizona sun of 1885 was a brass hammer on the skull, and Daniel Boone, all 35 years of him, felt every pounding blow. He was a statue of hardened leather and coiled muscle, a man who had carved a fearsome legend for himself in the cruel, endless expanse of the desert. He was the boss, the unspoken king of a vicious little kingdom of goons, and his word was law, backed by the twin steel sentinels on his hips. But the fear he instilled in others was a thin mask over the fear that clawed at his own gut. Not of death, he faced that daily, but of vulnerability. He lived by an unspoken ironclad rule: never marry. A wife, a family, was an anchor to a life he couldn't have, a luminous target for the enemies he'd accrued over years of hard, dirty living. His life was a jagged rock, sharp and alone by necessity. Yet Daniel Boone was no simple villain. He was a creature of fierce, almost biblical contradictions. There was a raw, unspent goodness in him that he poured out in secret acts of charity. He rode silent trails to leave money for a widowed rancher, or used his notorious fists to defend a small, helpless family from a rival gang's tax. He bought his salvation in installments, hoping to offset the black ledger of his soul. This dichotomy was the source of his profound, aching loneliness, the knowledge that he was good enough to help, but too stained to be loved. One scorchingly bright afternoon, the heat shimmered the horizon into a mirage. Daniel, riding back toward his hidden camp, his mind lost in the dusty arithmetic of his dark trade, noticed a dark, unnatural smudge in the middle distance. A horse cart, stationary, a black insect stuck in the beige dust. He rode closer, his hand instinctively resting on the grip of his Colt. The silence was wrong. The desert should have been noisy with buzzing flies, or the rattle of a snake. Instead he saw them, a woman and a young girl. The woman, perhaps 25, was a startling splash of delicate color against the harsh backdrop. She was inspecting a wagon wheel, her brow furrowed with an exhaustion that mirrored the land. Her daughter, a small thing of maybe 5 years, sat beside her, quiet, clutching a rag doll. Daniel felt a peculiar rusty catch in his chest. A profound wave of awe and alarm washed over him. These people did not belong in his world. He dismounted, his boots scuffing the dry earth. "Broken wheel," he stated, his voice a low gravel. The woman, whose eyes were the startling blue of a rare desert flower, jumped. "Yes, sir," she replied, her voice steady, despite her surprise. "We're stuck." Daniel said nothing more. His hands, the same hands that pulled triggers and busted skulls, moved with practiced, patient skill. He inspected the shattered spoke, found a sturdy piece of sun-bleached wood, and using tools from his saddlebag, he worked with the grim efficiency of a man trying to finish a chore before a greater reckoning. In less than an hour the repair was crude but solid. He spat dust from his mouth, and straightened, never meeting her eyes for too long. "It'll hold. Get going." The woman, her name was Sarah, stood, her face a map of gratitude. "Thank you, sir. We truly don't know what we would have done." "Go," he repeated, his tone brusque, pushing them away. He knew this land. He knew the direction they were headed. It was a path that veered too close to the territory of Silas, the very reason he'd kept his distance and his name from their conversation. As the cart clattered away, Daniel watched them, a grim premonition settling over him. He was a predator, but Silas was a vulture. He stayed his distance, a shadow tracking a light, a watcher protecting his anonymity. Daniel's instincts were rarely wrong. When the cart was a half-mile away, 3 figures on horseback burst from the mesquite scrub, Silas and 2 of his snarling hounds. They surrounded the wagon, the sound of coarse laughter carrying on the wind. They weren't just bandits, they were sadists. The sight of their cruel hands reaching for the terrified woman ignited a blinding fury in Daniel. The careful wall he'd built around his heart exploded. He didn't think, he simply rode. His charge was a thunderclap. He rode straight into the middle of them, kicking his horse to crash into one man, drawing and firing on the second in the same fluid motion. Silas, seeing the whirlwind of his enemy, drew his knife. The fight was fast, brutal, and intimate. Daniel fought with the desperate, punishing intensity of a man protecting his soul's one secret hope. He beat Silas to the ground, the dust flying up in a choking cloud of hate and violence. "Run, you dog, and don't come back," Daniel roared, his breath ragged. Silas, bloodied but unbowed, staggered to his feet, a dark promise in his eyes. "I'll be back for you, Daniel Boone. You hear me? I'll have your life, and whatever you hold dear." Daniel ignored him, racing to the cart. Sarah was slumped over the bench, a dark blossoming stain on her shoulder. In defending her meager possessions, she had been struck. The little girl, tears streaming down her dusty face, was huddled beside her. Daniel, his heart sinking with a new, terrifying weight, the weight of responsibility, carefully lifted Sarah. He took them both back to his rough-hewn cabin, a place of solitude and shadows. For a week he played the role of a silent guardian. He cleaned her wound, changed the bandages, and made sure she and her daughter, Eliza, were fed. His hands, used to the roughness of a rifle stock and reins, became surprisingly tender as he ministered to her. The cabin, once a monument to his isolation, was suddenly filled with the soft, steady rhythm of a woman's breath and the quiet presence of a child. As Sarah healed, the conversations began. Small, hesitant bridges over a vast chasm of their different lives. She told him of losing her husband a year prior, and her desperate, last-ditch journey to her husband's distant, estranged family. Her story was one of simple grief and profound courage. Daniel listened, the silence after her words stretching long and heavy. He knew he was falling, tumbling into an abyss of feeling he'd sworn to avoid. "I can't stay," he finally confessed, his gaze fixed on the glowing embers of the fire, not her face. "I'm a bad man, Sarah. My life is blood and dust. I didn't marry because a wife in this life is a dead woman, or worse. I have too many enemies." She absorbed his words, her blue eyes unwavering. She didn't argue, she simply nodded. "I understand, Daniel. Then I must leave." The next morning, the air was crisp and final. Daniel packed a small supply of food for her, his movements stiff. He watched Sarah put her hand on Eliza's shoulder, preparing to leave his cabin and his life forever. And then, a sound he hadn't heard in years escaped him. It was a strangled, broken cry of a man whose solitary fortress had finally been breached. His heart didn't just ache, it melted, collapsing into an unbearable void at the thought of her walking out and facing the wilderness alone. "Don't go," he said, the words torn from his throat. He turned, grasping her shoulders, his gaze burning with a fierce, agonizing love. Stay with me, Sarah. I'll marry you. I'll leave it all behind. The goons, the trails, the money, it's over. I'm through. I want you. I want Eliza." Tears, the first Daniel Boone had shed since he was a boy, tracked clean lines through the dust on his face. Her answering smile was the sun rising over his new life. It was a silent, absolute promise of a life redeemed. They were married by a circuit preacher 2 weeks later, a ceremony of 2 witnesses, and a vow whispered under the brutal, honest glare of the Arizona sky. Daniel Boone was reborn. He told his gang their run was over. He divested himself of his dark earnings, keeping only enough for a clean start. He had one glorious month of peace, a month where the scent of Sarah's hair replaced the stench of powder smoke, and the sound of Eliza's laughter chased away the demons of his solitude. He learned what it meant to be a husband and a father, to be truly happy. The peace was a lie, a beautiful temporary dream. He returned from a hunting trip one cold morning, the air still sharp with the smell of juniper and frost, to an empty cabin. The silence was heavier than any desert stone, a crushing weight where the sounds of gentle humming and a child's sleepy chatter should have been. His heart hammered out a panicked rhythm against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat of terror he hadn't felt since he was a hunted boy. His eyes, sharp from years of watching the horizon, immediately focused on the table, a single crisp folded piece of paper. The handwriting was neat, elegant, and chillingly familiar, the mark of a venomous snake trying to appear civilized. Daniel felt the blood drain from his face as he unfolded the note, reading the words that confirmed his deepest fear. I have what you hold dear, Daniel Boone. Come to the old canyon camp. I'll be waiting. Silas. Daniel's world fractured. It wasn't just anger, it was a devastating, agonizing breach of the fragile happiness he had built. He slammed his fist down, the force rattling the cheap tin plates and sending a coffee mug flying. Every ounce of the rage he had bottled up since meeting Sarah erupted in that moment, a pure molten fury aimed at the man who had dared to touch his sacred vow. Then, his eyes fell upon a raw message, scratched deep into the wooden wall near the fireplace. It was rough, desperate, yet imbued with a steel resilience, a testament to his wife's final desperate courage. Daniel, finish this. The message wasn't just a warning, it was a mandate. Sarah had understood his life, understood the ultimate, inescapable price of his past. She knew that to truly live free, the roots of the darkness had to be fully cut out. There would be no clean start, no simple exit across the border. The only path to freedom lay through the blood of his enemy. The outlaw in Daniel Boone surged back, cold, focused, and utterly merciless. The transformation was instant. The gentle baker's hands tightened into lethal fists, the quiet eyes narrowed to slits of deadly intent, and the slow, heavy gait became the coiled prowl of a predator. He strapped on his gun belt, checking the weight of the familiar steel. He gathered the few loyal men he trusted, those who weren't afraid to walk away from the old life forever, men whose souls like his yearned for a final absolution, and with a grim nod, he led the charge toward Silas's canyon camp. The final ride was silent, a funeral procession before the bodies were laid out. Daniel rode with a chilling calm, a man possessed of a single non-negotiable purpose. The thought of Sarah and Eliza kept the fear at bay, replacing it with an icy resolve. The battle, when it erupted, was a furious explosion of sound and fury, a reckoning fueled not by greed or territory, but by grief, rage, and unyielding love. Daniel dismounted and plunged into the melee, moving through the dust and chaos like a ghost of the past, a storm of bullets and raw power. He fought not like a bandit calculating odds, but like a husband defending his sacred future. Each bullet fired, each blow landed, was a step toward reclaiming his peace. He found Silas in the dirt, the villain sneering his last challenge. Daniel didn't hesitate. He shot him clean through, the sound echoing off the canyon walls, and watched the life drain out of the man who had dared touch his family. The fight was over in minutes, the silence that followed absolute, broken only by the settling dust and the ragged breathing of the survivors. He raced to a supply tent and ripped the flap open, finding Sarah and Eliza, shaken but miraculously alive, tied together in the shadows. He dropped to his knees, his relief a physical wave that nearly buckled him. It's done, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion, cutting the ropes from her wrists with a trembling knife. It's all done, Sarah. Sarah looked at him, her beautiful eyes shining, not with fear of the violence she knew he had just committed, but with the quiet understanding of a woman who had seen the hell he'd walked through for her. The message on the wall had been her last prayer and her command. I know, my love, she affirmed, her voice a soothing balm to his ravaged soul. Now let's go home. Daniel Boone knew the land. Staying in Arizona meant a lifetime of glancing over his shoulder, a constant parade of old enemies and new lawmen. He looked at his wife and daughter, saw the simple, absolute necessity of a true ending. We ride south, he announced. We go where no one knows the name Daniel Boone. The crossing into Mexico was the real farewell. They left behind the dust, the bloodshed, and the very identity of the feared desert boss. South of the border, he became a new man with a new name. He had the money to start fresh, and he used his grit, his focus, and his hands, no longer for violence but for creation. Daniel Boone, the outlaw, died in the Arizona desert. The man, the husband, was reborn as a baker. In a small sun-drenched town in Mexico, he opened a little panaderia. The man who once ruled by fear now rose at dawn, kneading dough. His hands, once stained with the grime of the trail, were dusted with flour. Sarah managed the small shop, and Eliza grew up healthy and happy, learning to count money by selling sweet rolls. He had his scars, and the memories were a constant silent presence. But every morning when his wife smiled at him over a fresh cup of coffee, and every evening, when his daughter hugged him before bed, Daniel Boone knew the truth. The real prize of the West was not gold or power, but the simple sweet peace of a quiet life, honestly and fiercely won. The real prize of the West was not gold or power, but the simple sweet peace of a quiet life, honestly and fiercely won.